so the experts can visit with you about the bill. So HB 2570, major changes to the UI law. It's a negotiated bill. It starts out with a new definition for benefit year. I'm just going to real quickly go through some of the things the bill does. It changes the taxable wage base. There's a new definition for temporary unemployment, new statutory definitions for statewide average annual wage and statewide average weekly wage, a new procedure for determining the maximum weekly benefit amount. Temporary unemployment is to be included in determining the maximum weeks of total unemployment benefits allowed a claimant based on the Kansas unemployment rate. The UI information technology system is directed to provide for an audit process to allow employers to report claimant compliance with work search requirements. That is to address ghosting, which you've heard about. New temporary unemployment benefit for school bus drivers. That's a significant addition. Work share for school bus drivers. Unemployment Security Board of Review, candidate qualifications are in the bill. Employment charge notices and restriction on charging less than $100 is changed. That's changed from the charge notice from annually to quarterly, and the restriction on charging is removed less than $100. There's a major provision that deals with one-time forgiveness of negative reserve account balances for active or inactive negative account balance employers. Abolishment of the Employment Security Interest Assessment Fund, which is no longer used. KDOL is required to annually publish some pseudo-tax rate and contribution rate tables, some information. Changes to the trust fund control tables and employer contribution rate tables. Those are major changes to the tables there in the bill. Delay of the deadline for the required formation of a new account and calculation of a new contribution rate following certain business acquisitions. That's something that assists with the administration of the bill, administration of the UI security employment law for the department. The SUTA voluntary contributions deadline extended from 30 days after the mail date of the rate notice to 90 days, so it gives employers additional time to make a voluntary contribution if they wish. Weekly benefits are to be suspended if there are any federal UI benefit payments to a claimant that are equal to or greater than a claimant's calculated weekly benefit amount. Electronic report filing is now required for employers with 25 or more employees, so the electronic filing requirement is expanded. Extension of the Unemployment Compensation Modernization and Improvement Council. That council is set to sunset, and the date for that is extended to the end of 2026. Confirmation of the Legislative Coordinating Council's authority to extend the new UI information technology system, implementation deadlines, and clarification of the procedure. Additional annual data reporting requirements for the department. Definition of and extensions to temporary unemployment. That's also a major part of this bill. That is really the major portions of the bill very quickly.
Questions for the revisor? Did you mention the new bus driver? You did, okay. I want to make sure we understand that. Okay, thank you. Seeing no questions. Committee, as I mentioned last week, there was an issue that was brought forward from the U.S. Department of Labor regarding conformity, and we did not have the fix last week to work this bill, but we do now. And so at this point, I want to go ahead and have Phil Hayes go over the conformity issue and how it's been dealt with in an amendment, and we'll have Charles pass that out.
Good morning, committee. Philip Hayes with the Arnold Group, and working closely with the Broad Business Coalition here in Kansas as well. If you looked at the supplemental report on Substitute House Bill 2570, on page 9 really starts some of the amendment synopsis as far as what was accomplished in the House. From when we brought this bill at the beginning of the session through negotiating and working with all parties, including the administrators. But the third bullet down was providing for a write-off of negative account balances. Thought we did really good work on the House, but oftentimes what gets accomplished in the state doesn't necessarily pass muster at the federal level, and the feds did take issue to uniformity and conformity concerns on how that essentially unfolded. So that really, item 3, that sub-bullet, is ultimately the culprit for this 18-page amendment that we're going to walk through. So just one small little thing turned into certainly a big component. I'll just walk through the balloon amendment as a whole. Page 16 or page 2 on yours, this addresses the taxable wage base increase. Under the House bill, we were going to do a one-time 100% forgiveness on the negative debt, which would allowed us to have just went to the landing point of a 45% taxable wage base overnight, essentially beginning in 26. To satisfy the feds on the conformity and uniformity issue, we really had to slow down and pump the brakes so we wouldn't necessarily overburden our Kansas employers. So we essentially took a feathered approach. Instead of going from 14,000 taxable wage base in 25 up to 45% taxable wage base of the state average annual wage in 26, we essentially said we're going to freeze that 14,000 wage base in 25 and 26, and then beginning in 27, we're going to go to a 25%. 25% is very, very similar to where we are today, which corresponds to that $14,000 wage base. So essentially, we're going to get 25 through 27 at a very close range from what employers are currently paying out on the taxable wage base. Then beginning in 28, we're going to escalate up by 5% increments from 28, 29, and 2030, ultimately landing at 40%. This is a lesser value than what we passed in the House, but it's also calibrated based on not being able to give 100% of the forgiveness. So very, very technical. I can keep you guys in the weeds for 3 hours if you wanted. But we essentially added a one-time trigger that said if we get to a point that 40% does not yield the desired effect to actually utilize the tax credit tables, which Kansas employers have been utilizing for the last 3 years now. It's on average saved about $65 million per year. We don't want to have policy negate the usage of how the system was designed. So essentially, beginning in 2032, if the fund everything in working together keeps us at either standard or tax increase tables, we're going to actually level up the taxable wage base one more increment, and then that will be the final resting place for the percentage there. Page 27 of the bill. This just talks about giving clarifying language on the combination of traditional as well as temporary unemployment weeks and how employers use that. Essentially, Kansas is on a trigger mechanism that if the health of our state economy is good, which it is now, the unemployment state rate is south of 1.4 or 4.5%. So we have 16 weeks of UI benefits currently. We want to make sure that that 16 weeks or whatever the threshold maintains regardless of how an employer uses traditional or temporary unemployment. So we still want that governing factor. Next page on 48, just a small technical cleanup there. Same thing on page 56. Actually, I believe on page 56 was in response to Senator Tyson's concerns a week or two ago, just adding clarifying language there. On page 58, this was just a small omission from the transition. This has been a bill like no other, but this is just a technical cleanup just for reference points. Page 59, just another note there, and I believe in working with the revisor's office, I don't know, as a publications department, there may be some other small technical components as well. Page 62 is another significant change, and the new employer rates for employers opening shop here in Kansas. If you're a new employer, non-construction, your rate historically has been 2.7% for the better part of a decade or longer. And if you're in construction, it was held at 6%. That 2.7 was actually halfway through the positive rated tables under the old system, and essentially we're just aligning this to the same way with the table shifts to give new employers opportunity for not to have such an overburdensome tax. And then the 5.5% is essentially the rate group 27, or it's going to be the lowest positive rated tax rate. So for new construction companies, we want to show them life above the line. So if they do manage their claims, they can stay in that positive territory for a lower tax rate. Page 63, the big box was, this is the cleanup provision and appeasing the feds on the conformity and uniformity. We could not do a 100% write-off, so essentially we had to walk right up to the line for the worst rated rate group in Kansas, which is at negative 7.15%. So this allows us to write off the lion's share of it and give these 1,400 plus employers a real opportunity to shift their tax position up to a lower tax rate in future years. The rest of that, we're shifting the tax schedules from a numbered system to an alpha system. So standard Schedule 7 becomes G, and you'll see the rest kind of fall in line. Page 64 is just some clarification also to Senator Tyson's concerns a couple of weeks ago. The rate tables themselves, the tax rates will be set, but what's not clear is, especially if we have an indexing of the wage base from year to year to year, this just clearly communicates and publishes the maximum taxable dollar per employee per year. So it's a companion chart or table, but it's not necessarily going to be codified in statute. So, and I think just for transparency, that's a good thing. They are published currently on the website. That's as of a couple of months ago. The DOL's website just seen a refresh recently. And then page 65 is simplifying. This is kind of the nuts and bolts to the USDOL concerns that we had. So maintaining the trust fund control table there on page 65, but once you get into, and actually on page 66, because we can't treat negative balance employers differently, we're getting rid of the secondary fund control table. It's not necessary, or we're prohibited from having it. So, but page 67 through 72 essentially is the numbers game, where we swim in the weeds and actually have the corresponding tax rates by rate group. And so you'll see page 67 and 8 is the standard schedule. Page 68 through the top page of 70 is the positive rated tax rate tables, and then page 70 through 72 is the negative rated employer tables. Other than that, I'll stand for questions if you have any. My eyes are cross-eyed from looking at so many numbers. And if the question comes up on why is some of this yellow, just the revisor's office, because there's so much in motion. This was prepared by me. I've submitted clean tables for the secretary to get this in a cleaner format once it comes out of committee, hopefully after today.
Thank you so much, Mr. Hayes. And I do want to let the committee know we do have Secretary Schultz here, who I'm sure she would be happy to answer any questions from the agency's perspective. And with that, I will open it up to questions. Committee, what questions do you have on this amendment? Senator Dietrich.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So all of this information that you're presenting to us today in this amendment has again been negotiated and vetted with all the parties that have been involved in this from the beginning?
Yes, from the business community, we are all in agreement here. KDOL is in agreement, and most importantly, we got the blessing in writing from USDOL on how this rolls up to the regs that they were applying against us.
Follow-up. Just one quick little follow-up. On the very first page of this amendment, 16, I guess it's, if you turn it over, that very first bullet, where you were talking about between 2025 and 2032, when these rates will gradually change and percentages. So Who is monitoring this? Are you depending upon Kansas Department of Labor? Because there's going to be some considerations along the way.
Correct, yeah, and actually annually, second quarter contributions come in to the state trust fund by July 31st of each year. And once those kind of hit the coffers, then KDWell has a team that actually goes to the computation and looks at the average high-cost multiple of the fund and determines which rate schedule becomes effective. That's been going on for 80 years. And so that will not change. But that's also why we want to produce the tax dollar tables. So that's what employers are ultimately looking at is, okay, I know my rate group, but how does this correspond to max tax per employee per year?
Thank you.
Committee, other questions? I know it's a lot to take in, so we'll give you all some time to digest it. Senator Dahl.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We said all the business was okay with this. Was there anyone that was opposed to this amendment?
No, I've had, it may have been in-house I mentioned, or maybe a couple weeks ago, I had more lobbyists, business owners reach out to me with this as this has progressed through the session. And once they had a better understanding, there's a lot of moving parts. It's difficult to argue for positive rated employers, which encompasses more than 97% of employers in our state. We're going to receive tax decreases over the next 3 years. When you look at the formula and the path that we're taking, that's going to equate to an additional $321 million left in our local communities across the state for the next 3 years. And the negative rated employers, they're getting tax relief also and ultimately getting a short step stool to get out of the hole and actually have lower tax rates in up to 3 years as well.
I find it, almost impossible. I all the kudos to you that we have a bill this big and you didn't have anybody complaining. What? That's just
I won't say complaining. We've had a lot of negotiations and late nights, and I certainly respect your guys sitting in your seats year after year because I got a pretty good taste of it. Trying to make everybody happy is near impossible. But I really am quite proud of this bill. It's a large bill. It's a large package. But I think all the stakeholders, there's a lot in here for everybody that is palatable and actually more than palatable. It's more than agreeable.
Senator Ware.
Thank you, Senator Dahl.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I think that you answered this question when we heard from you last, but I've slept since then. All these stakeholders that you talked to and all the business folk, you spoke to a lot of small businesses as well as large. Is that correct?
That is true. I've seen a cross segment, worked with hospitality, the restaurant, which are typically lower wage sectors. Across the board, I worked with some of the largest employers across the state. So I heard feedback really from all corners and kind of all sectors and all sizes of businesses.
Other questions? Committee, I do believe that you were emailed a one-page kind of a summary of what this bill does that I think is helpful as we are trying to explain or you have questions from Kansas SHRM, the Chamber, and NFIB. So check your email if you're interested in that, or I can have it resent to you, but it kind of hits the high points of what this bill does in relation to unemployment insurance. So any other questions? Seeing none, I'll take a motion on this amendment. Senator Dietrich.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll move that we pass out substitute for House Bill 2570 as amended. Is that what you want? Oh, this amendment.
We're just on the amendment.
Sorry, the amendment.
That's okay.
I move we approve this amendment as presented.
I have a motion, a second by Senator Ware. Any additional discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Opposed, no. And the amendment gets on. And I believe that is the only, if that's not big enough, the only amendment we have on this. So I will entertain a motion on the bill. Senator Dietrich. Yes. And Revisor Reimer did ask for if there are other instances of those technical changes that the revisor's office be given permission to make those adjustments. And so I would include that as an amendment in this as well. So Senator Dietrich.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Now I am excited to make this motion. I would move that we pass out substitute for House Bill 2570 as amended favorably for passage.
We have a motion. Do we have a second? Seconded by Senator O'Shea. Discussion on the motion. Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Committee, that concludes our work for today. We will be meeting on Thursday to work all of the bills, and I will have Connie send out a list of those that we will be working on Thursday. And with that, we are adjourned.